What if you're not broken? You're just sliding. Not because life hates you, not because you're weak, but because your mind has a physics to it. Once you lose your center, everything speeds up. One small slip turns into 10 bad decisions. Then you look back and swear the universe is against you. There's a simple way to catch the first sign before the fall gets fast. And when you see it, you won't call it bad luck ever again. You'll know exactly what to do next. Most people imagine unhappiness as something that hits you all at once, like a crash, like a collapse. One day you're fine, the next day everything is ruined. But that's not how it actually works. What really happens is quieter, more subtle, and far more dangerous. Think of a slope. When you stand at the top, it doesn't feel dramatic. The ground isn't shaking. There's no warning sound. You take one small step forward. Nothing serious. You're still in control, but once you're on a slope, something changes. Gravity starts doing the work for you. The further down you go, the faster you move. And here's the part most people miss. When you're sliding, you don't feel the speed. You only feel the wind. That's how bad days turn into bad lives. It usually starts in the morning. You wake up already tense. Not devastated, just off. You check your phone before you even sit up. A message annoys you. A notification reminds you of something unfinished. You tell yourself, I'll deal with it later. Then something small goes wrong. You're late. You spill coffee. Traffic is worse than usual. Nothing catastrophic. But your reactions are sharper than they should be. You snap at someone. You send a defensive email. You interpret a neutral look as judgment. And by midday, you're already exhausted. Not because the day was objectively hard, but because every decision required more effort than it should have. By the afternoon, you're not choosing anymore. You're reacting. You skip the workout. You grab whatever food is closest. You avoid the conversation you know you should have. And when the day finally ends, you sit there thinking, why does everything go wrong for me? It feels like bad luck, like the universe is piling on. But it's not luck. It's a mechanism. Once stress kicks in, your margin disappears. Your patience shrinks. Your thinking narrows. A small problem doesn't stay small. It creates tension. That tension changes how you think. And changed thinking produces worse decisions. Those decisions create more problems. That's the slope. And the most dangerous part is this. You don't realize you're accelerating. From the inside, it feels normal. It feels justified. It feels like you're just dealing with a lot right now. 2. This. From the outside, someone might say, you're not acting like yourself. But inside your head, it feels logical, even necessary. That's why people stay on the slope longer than they should. They don't think they're falling. They think they're responding to circumstances. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to stop. Because speed builds quietly. By the time you notice something is really wrong, you're already moving fast. Your body feels tired all the time. Your thoughts loop. Small setbacks feel personal. You start believing the problem is you, your character, your motivation, your discipline. But none of that is the root. The root is momentum. A slope doesn't care if you're strong. It doesn't care if you're smart. It doesn't care how good your intentions are. Once momentum builds, it carries you. That's why telling someone on a slope to just think positive never works. That's why motivation speeches bounce off. That's why advice feels useless when you're already sliding. You're not failing because you don't know what to do. You're failing because you're treating a physics problem like a moral one. This isn't about willpower. It's about understanding the terrain you're standing on. When things start going wrong faster than you can explain. When one bad moment seems to invite the next. When you feel like you're constantly reacting instead of choosing. That's not fate. That's not weakness. That's gravity. And until you recognize the slope for what it is, you'll keep blaming yourself for a system that was quietly pulling you downhill the entire time. It always begins with something so small you don't even register it as a problem, not a crisis, not a breakdown. Just a moment you brush past and tell yourself doesn't matter. Let me tell you about Alex. Alex isn't unlucky. He isn't lazy. He isn't falling apart. He's competent, reliable, the kind of person people describe as solid, and that's why he didn't notice the first mistake. It was a Tuesday morning. He woke up 10 minutes late. Not overslept, just late enough to rush. He skipped breakfast, grabbed his phone, scrolled while pulling on his shoes. Nothing dramatic, but when he got to work, he was already tense. There was a message from his manager asking for a quick update. Neutral, short, professional. Normally, Alex would have replied calmly. That day, He read criticism into it. He answered fast, a little sharp, a little defensive. The conversation didn't explode, but something shifted. For the rest of the morning, Alex felt watched. Every email felt heavier. Every task felt urgent. By noon, his shoulders were tight, his jaw clenched. He skipped lunch because he didn't have time. In the afternoon, he made a small mistake. Nothing serious. A detail missed. A number off, but instead of fixing it cleanly, he tried to cover it. That created another problem. Now he stayed late to clean things up. By the time he left the office, his head was buzzing. Not from work, from everything he didn't say, everything he avoided, everything he replayed. On the way home, he grabbed fast food, not because he wanted it, because he was too drained to choose anything else. That night, he planned to go to the gym. He even changed clothes, but his body felt heavy. His mind said, tomorrow. He sat down instead, scrolled, snacked, stayed up later than he should have. The next morning, he woke up tired, and now the slope was steeper. His reactions came faster. His patience got thinner. At work, he started avoiding conversations. Short answers, camera off, minimal effort. Not because he stopped caring, but because caring felt expensive. His body followed. Headaches, tight chest, shallow sleep. He stopped moving much, stopped eating well, and slowly, without noticing, he started pulling away from people. When his partner asked, "Are you okay?" he said, "I'm fine." But his tone wasn't. He snapped over small things, got irritated by questions, turned quiet instead of explaining. One evening, it finally spilled. A comment that didn't deserve a reaction got one anyway. Sharp, dismissive, hurtful. Silence followed. Alex sat there afterward, staring at the floor, thinking, what is wrong with me? From the outside, it looked like his life was unraveling. From the inside, it felt like everything just happened. But trace it back. It wasn't the argument. It wasn't the workload. It wasn't the relationship. It was that first 10 minutes. The rush, the skipped pause, the reaction instead of response. That's how the dominoes fall. Not because the first tile is big, but because once it tips, the rest don't ask for permission. Every small choice made under stress pushes the next one in the wrong direction. You don't wake up and choose chaos. You wake up tired. You don't decide to ruin relationships. You stop having the energy to regulate yourself. You don't lose discipline overnight. You make one compromised decision, then another, and once momentum builds, stopping feels harder than continuing. That's why people say, I don't know how I got here. They didn't jump. They slid. And the most dangerous part? Each step feels reasonable when it happens. Only later do you see the pattern. Only later do you realize the damage wasn't caused by one big failure, but by a series of small moments you thought didn't matter. That's how the slope works. And once you understand that, you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking the only question that matters. When did the first domino fall? By the time Alex realized something was wrong, the damage was already done. Not the big, obvious kind of damage, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't show up as a headline, but shows up as a look on someone's face. It was a Thursday night. He came home later than usual. Again, phone in hand, mind still at the office. He walked through the door and didn't even notice the silence at first. His partner, Mia, was sitting on the couch with the TV on, but she wasn't watching it. She looked tired. The kind of tired that isn't about sleep. Alex dropped his keys, opened the fridge, stared at it like it owed him answers. Mia said softly, "Hey, can we talk for a second?" And something in Alex snapped. Not because of her words, because of everything else. Because he'd been holding tension all week like a weight on his back. Because every day felt like sprinting with no finish line. Because he hadn't eaten right, hadn't slept right, hadn't breathed right. And because in his head, he wasn't falling, he was handling it. So when Mia asked to talk, his mind translated it as, "You're failing here too." He turned around and said, "Not right now. I can't do this." Mia didn't raise her voice. She didn't attack him. She just said, "You've been gone even when you're here." That sentence hit him like a punch, and instead of feeling it, he defended against it. "You don't understand what I'm dealing with," he said. "I'm doing my best. I'm trying to keep everything together." Mia's eyes watered. She said, "I'm not your enemy, Alex." But Alex didn't hear that part. He heard, "You're not enough." And when a person already feels like they're sliding, those words don't land like information. They land like accusation. So he went harder. He said things he didn't mean. Cold things. Sharp things. The kind of words you can't take back because they weren't just words, they were weapons. Mia stood up, wiped her face, and walked to the bedroom without saying anything else. No door slam. No dramatic exit. Just quiet. That's what made it worse. Alex stood there in the kitchen, breathing fast, heart pounding, staring at the floor like he was seeing himself from the outside for the first time, and for a moment, just a moment, the slope revealed itself. He sat down on the edge of the couch. No phone, no music, no distraction, just the sound of the fridge humming and the weight of what he'd done. And that's when the real breakdown happened. Not the yelling, the shame after. He thought, what is wrong with me? Because in his mind, this wasn't who he was. He wasn't a cruel person. He wasn't unstable. He wasn't the kind of man who hurts the person closest to him. And yet, here he was. That's the moment people never talk about. The moment after the explosion, when you're alone with what you've become. You don't feel anger anymore. You feel exposed. Like you just revealed something ugly inside you that you didn't want to admit was there. Alex stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Not just the argument. The week, the month, the small moments, the rushed mornings, the skipped meals, the defensive emails, the silence in conversations, the tomorrow that never came. And here's the terrifying part. He still didn't know what to blame. So he blamed life. He blamed work. Traffic, deadlines, pressure, he told himself. Anyone would break under this. And maybe that's true. But it's also a trap. Because when you blame everything outside of you, you create one conclusion. I have no control. And that is the deepest point of the slope. Not the weight gain. Not the exhaustion. Not the stress. The belief that you are a victim of momentum. The belief that your life is happening to you and you're just being dragged behind it. That night, Alex didn't text Mia, didn't apologize, didn't fix anything. Not because he didn't care, because he felt powerless. And when you feel powerless, you don't move. You freeze. He sat there and thought, maybe I'm just like this now. Maybe this is who I am. And that thought is poison. Because once you accept that story, you stop fighting the slope at all. But right before he fell asleep, another thought cut through. A quieter one. A more dangerous one. It asked him a question he had been avoiding the entire time. Not, how do I fix my life? Not, how do I become motivated again? Just this. When did it start? Not the argument. Not the burnout. Not the distance. The descent. What was the first small thing you let slide that made everything else easier to slide after it? Because if you can find that moment, you're no longer lost in the middle of the hill. You're finally looking at the map. And once you have the map, you can stop pretending it's bad luck. You can stop calling it fate. You can stop hating yourself for slipping. And you can do what almost nobody does at the right time. You can catch the slope before it takes you any further. Here's what most people get wrong about the slope. They think they'll feel it the moment it starts. They think the first sign will be sadness, or tears, or some dramatic moment where they look in the mirror and say, I'm not okay. But that's not how it begins. The first sign is not pain. The first sign is a loss of clarity. You're still functioning. You still show up. You still answer messages. You still do what you have to do. But something inside you shifts. You start reacting faster than you think. A small text makes you irritated. A harmless comment feels like disrespect. A tiny inconvenience feels personal. Not because those things are big, because you no longer have space inside you. When you're centered, life happens first, and emotion follows. There's a gap, a pause, a choice. When you start sliding, emotion happens first, and logic runs after it, trying to justify. That's the difference. And the dangerous part? From the inside, it still feels like, I'm fine. You tell yourself, I'm just tired. I'm just stressed. It's just a busy week. And because you're not collapsed, you assume you're not sliding. But the slope doesn't announce itself with collapse. It announces itself with distortion. So here's a simple test. Not a personality test. Not therapy. Just a check of your inner first sentence. The next time something goes wrong today, something small, listen carefully. Not to what you say out loud, to the first sentence in your head. When the coffee spills, when the train is late, when someone doesn't reply, when your plan gets interrupted, what is the first thing your mind says? If your first sentence is something like, Why is it always me? Of course. This always happens. Whatever. It won't matter anyway. Unquote. Here we go again. You're not at the bottom, but you have started descending, because those sentences aren't about the event. They're about a worldview. A worldview where you are powerless, where life is against you, where effort is pointless. And once your mind starts speaking that language, your actions follow. You become harsher, more impatient, more avoidant. You stop fixing small problems early because you're already convinced they'll grow. You stop taking care of your body because you don't feel like it will change anything. You stop being honest with people because it feels easier to withdraw than to explain. And slowly, you build a life that confirms the exact belief that started the slide. That's how the slope wins. Not by destroying you in one day, by teaching you to interpret everything through the lens of defeat. This is why the most dangerous person is not the person in a full breakdown. The most dangerous person is the one who says, "I'm fine," while their reactions are quietly becoming unstable. Because when you still believe you're okay, you don't interrupt anything. You don't slow down. You don't reset. You don't get off the slope. You just keep going, with a smile on your face and chaos building under the surface. And listen, if this is you, I'm not saying you're weak. I'm saying you're human. Your mind is not an honest narrator when you're under pressure. It will convince you that this is normal, that you're just pushing through. But pushing through while sliding is how people end up shocked by their own life 6 months later. So the goal isn't to diagnose yourself with a label. The goal is to catch the moment you lose your center. Because the moment you can say, "Wait, that sentence in my head isn't true," it's momentum talking. You've already won half the battle. You can't stop a slope you don't admit you're on. But the second you recognize it before the fall gets fast, you finally have what most people never get in time: a choice. Here's the mistake almost everyone makes at this point. Once they realize they're on a slope, their instinct is to do the opposite. They try to go uphill. They tell themselves, "I need more motivation. I need a breakthrough. I need to become a better version of myself." So they look for intensity. They binge motivation videos. They make extreme plans. They promise themselves a complete reset starting Monday. This is modern thinking. Explode forward. Change everything. Become unstoppable. And it fails almost every time. Because trying to go uphill while you're still sliding down is not strength. It's ignorance of physics. When you're already moving fast, climbing requires more force than you have. Not because you're weak, but because momentum is against you. This is where ancient systems understood something we forgot. The samurai didn't ask, "How do I go up faster?" They asked a different question: "How do I stop going down?" Because stopping descent takes far less energy than climbing ascent, and it changes everything. Think about it. If you're losing money, the first move isn't to get rich. It's to stop bleeding. If your body is breaking down, the first move isn't peak performance. It's to stop the habits that are damaging you. If your mind is spiraling, the first move isn't happiness. It's to stop making today worse than yesterday. This is the shift. You don't need a miracle. You need a break. Modern self-improvement sells you ignition. Ancient discipline teaches you control. Motivation is about spikes. Systems are about friction. Motivation asks, "How high can I go today?" Systems ask, "How do I make it harder to fall tomorrow?" That's why so many people feel inspired and then collapse again. They try to leap uphill from the middle of the slide. But the people who actually recover don't look heroic at first. They don't announce a comeback. They don't post transformation photos. They don't even feel better right away. They simply stop doing the things that accelerate the fall. They stop checking their phone first thing in the morning. They stop skipping sleep. They stop numbing themselves every night. They stop reacting immediately to everything. Small, almost boring, but every one of those actions adds friction. And friction slows momentum. This is why the phrase sounds so underwhelming, yet so powerful. They didn't try to go uphill. They stopped going downhill first. That single decision changes your relationship with effort. You're no longer fighting gravity head-on. You're reducing its pull. And once momentum slows, something unexpected happens. Clarity returns. Not joy. Not confidence. Clarity. You start seeing options again. You pause before reacting. You regain a small gap between stimulus and response. And inside that gap is choice. This is the moment where hope becomes direction. Not, "I believe things will get better, but I know what to stop doing next." Direction beats hope every time. Because hope without direction creates frustration. But direction, even without hope, creates progress. This is why discipline, in its original sense, was never about punishment. It was about containment, creating boundaries strong enough to hold you when your mind can't. The goal isn't to feel strong right now. The goal is to design your days so you don't need to be. When you stop the descent, even slightly, the slope changes. What felt impossible yesterday becomes manageable tomorrow. And only then, only after momentum slows, does climbing make sense. Not because you forced it, but because the ground stopped moving under your feet. That's the real aha. It's, you don't escape the slope by attacking it. You escape it by refusing to slide further. And once you do that, going up stops feeling like a fantasy. It starts feeling like a consequence. There's something important you need to hear right now. Your brain is not against you. It's not sabotaging you. It's not lazy. And it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Just in the wrong mode. When stress lasts too long, your brain switches priorities. It stops asking, what's the best decision? And starts asking, what keeps me safe right now? This is survival mode. Cortisol goes up. Your nervous system tightens. Long-term thinking shuts down. You become reactive. That's why when you're exhausted, a small comment feels like an attack. That's why when you're overwhelmed, you avoid the one task that actually matters. That's why one mistake makes you want to quit everything. Not because you lack character, but because your brain has decided danger is near. And in danger, the brain doesn't care about growth. It cares about relief. Fast relief. Scrolling. Numbing. Escaping. Anything that lowers the pressure for a moment. This is where most people make it personal. They say, I know what to do, so why can't I do it? I must be weak. I must be undisciplined. That self-blame only adds more stress, which keeps the brain in survival mode longer. It's a closed loop. Knowing more doesn't fix this. Understanding doesn't fix this. Motivation doesn't fix this. Because the brain doesn't change modes from insight alone. It changes modes from environment, from repetition, from signals that say, we are not under attack. This is why ancient systems never relied on willpower. They relied on ritual, simple, repeated actions done regardless of emotion. Not to become enlightened, but to stabilize the nervous system. Monks didn't meditate to feel peaceful. They meditated to train the mind to stay steady under pressure. Samurai didn't build discipline to look strong. They built it so their minds wouldn't panic when things went wrong. They understood something modern culture forgot. You don't argue with a stressed brain. You calm it. And you don't calm it with speeches. You calm it with structure. Same time, wake up. Same simple movements. Same quiet moments. Nothing heroic. But every repetition sends a signal. We're safe enough to slow down. Once cortisol drops, even slightly, something shifts. You stop overreacting. You stop catastrophizing. You regain access to choice. This is why designing your environment matters more than forcing yourself. If your phone is always within reach, your brain will reach for relief. If your nights are chaotic, your mornings will be reactive. If your days have no anchors, your mind will drift back to threat. Discipline isn't about control. It's about reducing decision-making when your brain can't be trusted to decide well. That's what rituals do. They decide for you, not because you're incapable, but because you're human. This is the moment where shame should leave the room. You are not failing because you don't want it badly enough. You're struggling because your system is overloaded. And overloaded systems don't need pressure. They need design. This is why small disciplines work when big promises fail. A short walk, a fixed bedtime, a quiet morning ritual. Each one nudges your brain out of survival and back into clarity. Not instantly, not dramatically, but reliably. And once your brain is no longer fighting imaginary threats, discipline stops feeling like torture. It starts feeling natural. Not because you changed who you are, but because you finally stopped asking a stressed mind to act like a calm one. You don't need to hate your brain to change your life. You need to work with it. And that begins the moment you stop calling this a personal failure and start treating it like what it really is. A system running in the wrong mode. Change the mode, and everything that felt impossible starts to feel doable again. If you're listening to this and thinking, I get it, I really do, but I don't have the energy to fix anything, this part is for you. Because there's a version of the story no one says out loud. Sometimes you don't fail because you didn't try hard enough. You fail because you've been trying for too long, without rest, without clarity, without relief. When you've been sliding for weeks or months, exhaustion becomes your default state, not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. You still go to work. You still reply to messages. You still function, but everything inside feels heavy. Every task feels bigger than it should. Every decision feels expensive. Even simple habits feel impossible. And that's when people start saying things that make it worse. Just be disciplined. Push through. You already know what to do. But here's the truth they forget. You cannot stop a car speeding downhill with willpower alone. If you're already near the bottom, your job is not to climb. Your job is not to transform. Your job is not to become your best self. Your job is much simpler. Don't slide any further today. That's it. Not 7 days. Not a perfect routine. Not a comeback story. Just this one question. What is the smallest action I can take today that makes tomorrow slightly less painful than today? Not better. Not amazing. Just less bad. Maybe that means going to bed 20 minutes earlier. Maybe it means not opening that app tonight. Maybe it means answering one message you've been avoiding. Maybe it means drinking water instead of another drink. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it interrupts the descent. Most people think change starts with motivation. It doesn't. Change starts when momentum shifts. And momentum doesn't care about big actions. It cares about direction. One small action that stops the slide does more than 10 ambitious plans you're too tired to follow. This is where the illusion of willpower needs to die. You don't stop sliding because you suddenly become strong. You stop sliding because you reduce the forces pulling you down. Less friction, less pressure, less self-judgment. Stop asking the most exhausted version of yourself to perform like a rested one. That's not discipline. That's cruelty. The rule when you're low is different. You don't optimize. You stabilize. You don't demand progress. You prevent damage. If all you do today is avoid making things worse, that is not failure. That is survival done correctly. And survival is not something to be ashamed of, because once the slide slows, even slightly, something changes. Your mind breathes. Your reactions soften. Your choices return. Not because life magically improves, but because you're no longer accelerating toward the bottom. So if you're listening to this and feeling stuck, hear this clearly. You are not weak for feeling tired. You are not broken for feeling stuck, and you are not behind for needing to slow down. Today does not need heroics. It only needs restraint. One less slide. One small break. One quiet decision to not let the slope take you further than it already has. That's enough for today. And sometimes, that's how everything starts turning around. Once the descent slows, even a little, you can finally see again. This is where most people rush. They want the full plan, the perfect routine, the transformation, but that's not how you exit a slope. You don't escape with intensity. You escape with structure. There are 3 principles that matter here, not because they sound good, but because they work when motivation is gone. The first is recognition. This is not positive thinking. This is not pretending you're fine. Recognition means catching yourself in the moment your mind starts lying to you. The moment you think, everything is against me. This always happens. It's pointless to try. You don't argue with it. You don't shame yourself. You simply label it. This is the slope talking. That one sentence creates distance, and distance gives you back choice. Every day you practice recognition, you shorten the slide, because you stop mistaking a mental reaction for reality. The second principle is interruption. This is where most people fail. They think interruption means changing everything. It doesn't. Interruption means breaking the pattern at the smallest possible point. When the thought appears, you change the next action. Not the whole day. Not your life. If the pattern is stress, escape, regret, you interrupt it with something boring, small, and repeatable. Stand up, drink water, walk for 5 minutes, close the app, breathe slower than you want to. Interruption is not dramatic. That's why it works. It stops momentum without demanding strength. The third principle is reconstruction. This is where people think discipline lives. But real discipline isn't force, it's design. Reconstruction means rebuilding your days so fewer bad decisions are even possible. You don't rely on willpower. You build friction. You make the wrong choice slightly harder, and the right choice slightly easier. This is where rituals matter, not because they're sacred, but because they stabilize your nervous system. That's the system. Recognition, interruption, reconstruction. Now here's how you practice it. Not forever, just for 7 days. Day 1 is sleep. Not optimization, stability. You go to bed earlier than usual, even if you don't fall asleep. You lie down, you dim the lights, you stop stimulating your brain. This isn't about productivity. It's about giving your nervous system a signal of safety. Day 2 is movement, nothing intense. You walk, you stretch, you move your body long enough to feel your breathing change. Movement is not fitness here. It's a reset button for stress. Day 3 is confrontation. One small thing you've been avoiding. One message, one task, one conversation. Not everything, just one. Avoidance accelerates the slope. Confrontation slows it. Day 4 is service. Do something useful for someone else. Without posting it, without expecting anything back. Service breaks self-obsession, and self-obsession is fuel for the slide. Day 5 is gratitude, not the forced kind. You write down 3 things that didn't make the day worse. That's it. This trains your mind to notice stability again, instead of only threat. Day 6 is connection. One honest interaction, not complaining, not performing, just being real. Isolation doesn't start with being alone. It starts with hiding. Day 7 is enjoyment. One thing you enjoy without guilt, without turning it into a reward. Joy is not something you earn after suffering. It's something that reminds your brain why staying alive matters. None of these days are impressive. That's the point. This is not a self-improvement challenge. It's a system reset. You are not trying to go uphill yet. You are proving one thing, that the slope does not control you completely. If you miss a day, you do not restart. You do not judge. You continue. Consistency here is not perfection. It's refusal to quit after a slip. That's how reconstruction actually works. Small actions, repeated, under low pressure. This is how momentum changes direction. Not with motivation, not with speeches, with structure that holds you up when you can't hold yourself. And once that structure exists, once the slope flattens, then, and only then, you can decide where you actually want to go. But first, you stop the fall. There's a moment that ruins more people than failure ever could. It's not the big collapse. It's the small slip. You miss one workout. You eat like trash one night. You wake up late once. You scroll for 2 hours when you promised you wouldn't, and something inside you says, well, that's it. Not, I messed up, but I'm the kind of person who always messes up, and that single sentence turns a mistake into a verdict. That's why one small error can destroy your discipline. Because you're not losing a day, you're losing your identity. This is what psychologists call all or nothing thinking. But you don't need the label to recognize the pattern. Your mind only allows 2 boxes, perfect or pointless. If you're perfect, you feel safe. If you're not, you feel exposed. So the moment perfection breaks, your brain panics, and it reaches for the fastest relief. Forget it. Start over tomorrow. But tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And suddenly you're back on the slope, wondering how you fell again. Here's the part most people don't understand. That voice isn't laziness. It's not weakness. It's your survival brain trying to protect you from the pain of being not good enough. Perfectionism is not a high standard. It's a fear response. It's your mind saying, if I can't do it perfectly, I'd rather not feel the shame of trying. And on a slope, shame is gasoline. So you need a rule, a survival rule, because if you don't have one, your mind will write the story for you. Here it is. Never judge the whole journey by one step. You fell? Fine. But do not turn the fall into a narrative. Do not lie on the ground and start giving a speech about who you are, because that's where the slope wins, not in the fall. In the story you tell afterward, Musashi had a principle in combat. Keep your posture, even when you take a hit. Not because you're invincible, because the moment you lose form, you lose control. Discipline works the same way. The goal is not to be flawless. The goal is to recover fast. Most people think discipline is staying on the path. Real discipline is returning to the path without drama. No guilt ceremony. No punishment. No, I'll make up for it. Just return. Because the fastest way to rebuild momentum is to stop bleeding energy into self-hatred. So let me give you a practical system. A break glass protocol for when you mess up. When you slip, do only 3 things. First, shrink the timeline. Don't ask, can I be consistent for the rest of my life? Ask, what can I do in the next 10 minutes? The slope grows in large time frames. It dies in small ones. Second, Do the smallest repair, not the perfect comeback, not the extreme reset. The smallest repair. If you skip the gym, you do 10 push-ups at home. If you ate like trash, you drink water and take a walk. If you wasted the morning, you choose one task and finish it. You're not trying to win the day. You're trying to tell your brain, we are still in control. Third, end the day with a clean action. One clean action before sleep. It can be as simple as preparing your clothes, putting your phone in another room, writing down tomorrow's first step. This matters because your last action becomes your memory, and your memory becomes your identity. If you end with a clean action, you go to bed as someone who returns, not someone who collapses. And over time, that becomes your real discipline. So hear this clearly. A perfect day doesn't make you strong. A recovery day does. Every time you stand back up after a small mistake, you're building the exact friction that keeps you from sliding in the future. That's what discipline actually is. Not never failing, but refusing to let failure take your steering wheel. On the slope, the winner isn't the person who never slips. It's the person who doesn't turn a slip into a sentence. And if you can master that, you become almost impossible to break. Loneliness isn't what breaks you. That's the lie most people live under. They think, if I'm alone, I'll fall apart. So they keep noise around them. Messages, notifications, people, attention, anything that proves they still exist in someone else's mind. But here's what almost no one is willing to say out loud. Being alone won't kill you. Living on approval will, because approval is not love. Approval is a drug, and the withdrawal is brutal. You don't just want company. You want confirmation. You want someone to tell you you're doing okay. You want someone to notice your effort. You want someone to say you're still valuable. And when that disappears, when no one texts back, when the likes don't come, when you walk into a room and nobody looks your way, your mind doesn't just feel sad. It panics. Not because you lost people, because you lost the mirror you used to recognize yourself. That's the real slope. A man can survive hunger. A man can survive fatigue. But a man who cannot stand without being seen will always be owned by the crowd. This is why Musashi chose solitude. Not because he hated people, not because he was above connection, but because he understood a cold truth about power. If your sense of worth depends on the eyes of others, your life will always be unstable. You will be strong on days you are praised, and weak on days you are ignored. You will work hard when you are applauded, and collapse when you are judged. That's not discipline. That's slavery with a smile. So we need to make a distinction. There are two kinds of loneliness. One is forced. It feels like punishment. It feels like abandonment. It feels like you're being left behind while everyone else keeps moving. That kind of loneliness can crush you. But the other kind is chosen. And chosen loneliness is not emptiness. It's training. It's the space where you stop performing and start listening. It's where you hear the voice underneath the noise. The voice you've been drowning out with validation. And that's why solitude is scary. Not because it's painful, but because it's honest. When you're alone, there is no audience, no quick reward, no good job to carry you, just you, and whatever you've been avoiding. So let me ask you the question that changes everything. Are you alone because you're hiding from the world, or because you're learning how to stand without it? Because those are not the same. Hiding is weakness. Training is strength. And the modern world does everything it can to confuse the two. It tells you solitude is depression. It tells you silence is dangerous. It tells you need to be connected at all times. But being connected is not the same as being grounded. You can have 1,000 people in your pocket and still feel completely hollow, because what you're really addicted to isn't people, it's reassurance. And reassurance makes you fragile. It makes you quit when no one claps. It makes you doubt when no one replies. It makes you overthink every move because you're trying to control perception. That's not living. That's negotiating. Musashi didn't build his strength by constantly checking if he was liked. He built it by returning to himself again and again until his center didn't wobble. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most of your motivation problems are actually validation problems. You don't stop because you're tired. You stop because nobody noticed. You don't doubt because the goal is hard. You doubt because you're not being affirmed. So if you want to become unstoppable, you don't just need better habits. You need sovereignty. You need the ability to do the right thing in silence, to train when nobody is watching, to rebuild when nobody is cheering, to continue when nobody understands, not because you're cold, not because you don't care, but because your life is yours, And when you no longer need the world to confirm your worth, the world loses its power to push you down the slope. That's the highest level. Not being popular, not being impressive, being free even when you're alone. If you remember only one thing from this entire video, let it be this: you are not stuck. You're just standing on a slope. And there's a massive difference between those two. Stuck sounds like a prison, like something is wrong with you, like your life has a label stamped on it forever. But a slope is different. A slope means you can still move. A slope means the direction can change. A slope means the problem isn't who you are. It's what's been happening to you quietly every single day. That's why the descent feels so confusing. It didn't start with a disaster. It started with a small shift, a tiny reaction, a missed routine. One day you didn't sleep. One day you didn't train. One day you said, "I'll fix it tomorrow." And then tomorrow became a pattern. Then the pattern became your identity. And that's the most dangerous part of the slope. It makes you believe the lie that this is just who I am now. But you've seen the truth. The first sign wasn't sadness. It was losing clarity. You started reacting faster than you could think. You started feeling before you could choose. And once your internal space disappeared, life began to shove you around. Then we hit the real turning point. The people who get out don't climb first. They stop going down first. They don't wait for motivation. They don't wait to feel ready. They don't gamble their future on a temporary mood. They interrupt the descent, because you cannot build a life on a moving treadmill, and you cannot heal while your habits keep cutting you open. And once you understand the biology, you stop hating yourself. Your brain wasn't trying to destroy you. It was trying to protect you. Stress flipped you into survival mode. Short-term comfort started winning. Long-term thinking started disappearing. That's not moral failure. That's a system running on emergency settings. So the answer is not self-hate. The answer is design. That's why we built the framework. Recognition, interruption, reconstruction, not as a feel-good idea. As a mechanical process, you recognize the slope, you interrupt the slide, you rebuild with small rituals that your brain can actually obey. And when you fail because you will, one mistake does not mean it's over. That's the perfectionist trap. That all-or-nothing voice that says, "You ruined it." But real discipline isn't perfection. Real discipline is refusing to let one slip become a sentence. And then we reached the deeper layer. Not just habits, sovereignty. Because if your strength depends on being praised, then the world will always control you. If you need someone to validate your existence, then silence will feel like death. So you train a different kind of power. The power to do the right thing without applause. The power to rebuild in private. The power to stand alone without collapsing. That's what Musashi understood. Not be alone, but be unshakable. And now we're here, right at the moment where most people do nothing. They feel this video, they nod, they even get emotional, and then they go right back to the slope. So here's the choice. Not a dramatic choice, not a perfect choice, a simple one. Will you let the slope decide your next month, or will you interrupt it today? Not with a life overhaul, with one small act that makes tomorrow 1% less heavy. That's how the descent breaks. And if you know someone who's been acting fine, but you can feel they're quietly sliding, send them this, not to shame them, not to fix them, just to give them language, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give a person isn't motivation. It's the moment they realize, I'm not broken, I'm just on a slope, and that means I can change direction.